The class, we're starting a brand new series going through the book of Revelations, which is entitled, the title of the book is called The Unveiling. And we'll try to add a few new insights as we go. Oh, Curtis has it there. I think Curtis enjoyed that more than anything I ever wrote. He made some nice comments on it when he was reading it.
I think it's one of the best things. It held my attention. I'm not saying that other things that you've written, well, you know, the thing that held my attention first time ago, that held my attention, a lot of your earlier works, but this has not only width, but depth that I really appreciated coming from you.
Well, thank you, Curtis. Yeah, I first become interested in the book of Revelation the first time I read the New Testament. I think, I can't remember if I read it before my mission or not, but I know I read it on my mission when went on a mission for the LDS Church when I was 19. And when I read the book of Revelation, I thought, boy, this is the most complicated thing I've ever read in my life. I thought Isaiah was bad. I read the Book of Mormon when I was 16, had a bunch of quotes from Isaiah in it. And I couldn't make heads or tails of it the first time I read Isaiah. Well, I thought Isaiah was complex, but then when I read the book of Revelations, I concluded that was the most complex thing I'd ever read in my life. I couldn't hardly make heads or tails of it outside of, it looked like it was telling us that this earth was in store for a lot of big, real terrible things were going to happen. You know, wars, comets descending on the earth, destroying life in the ocean, plagues, all kinds of terrible things prophesied in this book. And so, but the rise of the Antichrist and all these things, but it really piqued my interest to try to understand it. So I made up my mind that I wanted to understand what the meaning of this book was. And so I read it over several times and still couldn't make heads or tails of a lot of it. And so I bought some, I read what I could while the LDS church materials, and they didn't have anything to speak of. So I went outside the church and read some commentaries by other ministers, and they actually said some pretty good stuff that shed a little bit additional light. But still, there was a lot of complexity in there that boggled my mind. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to memorize the whole thing. And maybe if I get it memorized, I'll get the interpretation will just come to me. So I went on a quest to memorize the whole book. And I got most of it memorized. Well, I didn't memorize the first 3 chapters about the churches. I started with the vision, and pretty well got over next year or so, I got pretty much committed to memory. But I still didn't even understand it even after I memorized it. It helped a little bit because I'd reflect on passages in it was going through my mind. And, but eventually it did come to me, the meaning of the book. It's just totally different than I expected. The reason I couldn't figure it out is I was headed the wrong direction. And the right direction is actually given in the first verse. But before we start there, I want to give an overview of the whole thing. It's divided into 3 different sections. The first section is chapters 1 through 3. This contains letters to the 7 churches in Asia. Okay. And it appears to be just advice that John the Revelator is sending to the heads of 7 different churches, and good advice he seems to be giving, and that seems to be it. And then the second part begins with chapter 4, and this is where the heavens is open to John. And this includes, this is the second major part of the book. And then the third major part is chapters 14 through 22. But what I learned about the meaning of the book is totally different than what I expected. Is we're not going to see a manifestation of the book of Revelations exactly as it's portrayed there. Okay. That's not the purpose of the book, to tell us about the end of the world. The purpose of the book is to tell us how we can progress from just being an ordinary seeker to being a master like the Christ and beyond. So these are hidden messages as to how the disciple can progress from being just a regular seeker to being like his master and progressing with his master. And the first sections, the letters to the churches, are letters for explaining how the person can advance to being a disciple, a true disciple, where he's a usable tool in the hands of God or a master. The second is where he proceeds from being a disciple to being a master himself. And the third is going beyond being a master, the work he can do when he becomes a master of wisdom, like the Christ. And so we have these 3 stages in the book, which is quite fascinating. So when this dawned on me that this is the true meaning of the book, I mean, it just put an entirely different spin on it, so to speak. That's why nobody really can explain significantly what all the different passages mean, because they have to fit the law of correspondences, and a lot of them in the regular interpretation just do not fit the law of correspondences. Maybe a couple things seem to, then the next passage seems out of whack. But when you look at it from this light, everything fits and flows smoothly, and you can see what it means as we go along. So that said, we will begin with the interpretation of the book itself. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we begin that?
So basically, you've taken it from an external interpretation to an internal interpretation, so that it applies to the aspirant personally rather than the world in general.
And as far as external goes, there are cycles where certain things seem to apply externally, and but not 100% all the way through. It will never be 100% external manifestation, but internally it will, because that which is internal does manifest externally, but not always with exactness. Okay.
I have a question, JJ.
Sure.
And I haven't read your book on this. You probably cover it, and if I just wait, you'll probably cover it in your lesson.
That's all right.
Sometimes I get confused on why things are done the way they're done. I don't understand the subterfuge of why the book of Revelations was taught the way it was taught. It seems like it led more people astray, doing more harm than good. And the principle of soul contact is mixed in there with the beast, and that just seems like we would have been farther along, or so many more people would have benefited if it would have just been taught the way you're teaching it now, as opposed to laid out in this gobbledygook of messiness called the Book of Revelations back then. So what was the purpose of designing it like that? Designing the
Well, it was a very wise purpose in the fact that if he would have clearly told people how to become like Christ, the book, every vestige of the book would have been destroyed. But everybody was into the end of the world. People were looking forward to the end of the world. Christians were all looking forward to the end of the world. And so the end of the world was very popular. And John knew if he wrote a book about the end of the world, that it would not be destroyed. But if he wrote a book on how to become like Christ, that would have been seen as heresy. And the powers that be would have destroyed it. They already destroyed a lot of the early Christian writings. Some of the greatest light in the writings is gone because it was considered heretical. And some of them have resurfaced, like the Gospel of Thomas. The powers that be thought they had that all destroyed, and it's a copy or two of it managed to resurface. But there's been a lot of really good early writings were destroyed. And so when they put the Bible together, they tried to destroy everything that seemed to be run contrary to the way they were interpreting the passages from the Bible. If it didn't fit, they burned it. And so John had to write it this way to make sure it would not be destroyed. But if we can give the correct interpretation now, then the light is there, and the message is preserved. And even in between, for the past 2,000 years, the message registered some of the messages of the book, some of the light of the book permeated different individuals. So it wasn't, the light was not wasted for the 2,000 years, but the time for it to be amplified is now, when we can see what the true meaning of the book of Revelations is. And the true meaning of the book of Revelations is actually stated in the first 3 verses, but it just went over everybody's heads. And it starts out with this: the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to shew unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Okay? Now it says the revelation of Jesus Christ, and the book, it's called the Book of Revelations. And that comes from, the revelation comes from the word apocalypsis. And that's why the Book of Revelations is sometimes called the apocalypse, because it comes from that Greek word meaning that's interpreted to mean revelation. Okay, so the revelation of Jesus Christ, I'll read over these first 3 verses, and we'll go over them in greater detail. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bare a record of the word of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ, and of all things that he saw. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Okay, there's a lot of meat in this first verse that actually tells what John is up to. yet it's gone over everybody's heads for 2,000 years. First of all, it's declared to be a revelation of Jesus Christ. And that comes from, like I said, the word apocalypsis, which means it's interpreted to mean revelation. There's different ways to interpret it. Revelation, revealed, to light and manifestation, and so on. But technically, it comes from a Greek word, apocalypto, which means to take off the cover. And this is why the most correct translation of the New Testament I consider to be what do I call it? Anyway, it translates it as unveiling. And I thought when you look at the Greek word, that unveiling is the most accurate translation.
Reveal.
It's a concordant version. That's what I was trying to think of for the version I think is the most popular. And the concordant version uses the word unveiling to translate it instead of revelation. So it starts out, so we read the first verse. It tells us that the book of Revelation is about the unveiling of Jesus Christ, the uncovering of Jesus Christ, the revealing of Jesus Christ. But that's pretty interesting because when you read the book, it doesn't seem to say anything about Jesus Christ. It's all about the end of the world. Nothing about Christ in there hardly, very little about Christ. So if the book is about the unveiling of Jesus Christ, then why is there no unveiling of Jesus Christ in the book? Why is it just about the end of the world? And that's because the unveiling of Jesus Christ is portrayed in symbolic language. And the end of the world was popular theme among the early Christians that the writing would be preserved because it would be considered something that they would want to keep because everyone was looking forward to the end of the world at that time. Okay. Second line here, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, which God gave to John to show his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Okay, well, has the things in the book of Revelation, the end of the world, come to pass yet? It's been 2,000 years now. Is that a short period of time? If I were to say, well, I'm going to tell you something that's going to happen in just a short period of time, and it's not really going to happen till the year 4050 or something like that, would you think I was crazy for saying that? I mean, that's not a short period of time. If I'm making a prophecy and saying this is going to happen in a short period of time, you're thinking maybe within 5 years or a decade at the most or something like that, but not 2,000 years. So did he speak incorrectly? Or were the things capable of happening in a short period of time to the person that would read this book? Okay, now it says another thing that's very curious. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. How many people have read the book of Revelations and felt blessed and felt like it was wonderful things in there that they can have? Okay. No, you read the book of Revelation, that scares the dickens out of you. It talks about the end of the world, armies of millions of people destroying all kinds of things and plagues, and comet hitting the earth, and the Antichrist rising up and putting people to death, and all kinds of terrible things in there. And how can you feel blessed by reading that? How can you feel that by entering this apocalyptic time, you're going to feel blessed? Even the righteous, it says, will be persecuted during this period of time. So there's not much blessing to be acquired by even if you have a knowledge of terrible things going to happen in the future, you won't feel very blessed by it. But when you consider the right interpretation of this, all these things make a lot of sense. Okay, first of all, it is an unveiling of Jesus Christ. It's an unveiling of not just the man Jesus Christ, but how to become like Christ. It's an unveiling of the steps that you can take to become like your master. Okay, and if you take those steps, then the rest makes sense. Then, yeah, blessed is he that readeth. Okay, if you take steps to become like Christ, yeah, you will feel blessed, just like it says. And secondly, these things are at hand. You can have them now. So you can take the things in the book of Revelations and incorporate them now. The time is at hand. And the things in there, if you incorporate them in your life, they will shortly come to pass exactly as it says. And when you interpret the regular way, this first introduction makes no sense whatsoever. 2,000 years is not a short period of time, still hasn't come to pass. You don't feel blessed when you read it. And it doesn't say hardly anything about Christ in there, literally. So the regular interpretation makes no sense when you see it from the idea that it's telling us how to become like our master. Then the introduction makes a tremendous amount of sense. Okay, any comments on that before we move on? Okay, the next verses. John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne. Okay, first of all, the 7 churches are in Asia. In Asia today, we think of a pretty big area, but in that time, it was just a much smaller area around the Mediterranean. So the 7 churches, Asia back then was quite a bit different than Asia today. It's more like well, anyway, much smaller area. Now, Asia comes from the word asu, which means sunrise or light. Now, churches comes from the word ecclesia, which means called or gathered out. And so the letters that John sent were to the 7 churches in Asia. And so Asia could be interpreted, the 7 churches in Asia could be interpreted to mean the gathering of lights, or something similar, or called or gathered out into the light. And so that could be one of the meanings behind the 7 churches in Asia. Okay, then it talks about that 3 people involved in giving this revelation. First of all, which is God, which is and was and is to come. And God, we're told in all kinds of different esoteric writings, lives in the eternal now. And so by calling God as uh, that which was and is to come is meaning that he embraces everything that could be considered in the eternal now, which always is. Okay. And then he talks about the seven spirits before the throne of God, which is quite interesting. Now, these seven spirits are quite, have many different correspondences. And the word seven appears all kinds of times in the book of Revelation. That appears 59 times in the book of Revelations alone. And so 7 is a number that John put a lot of emphasis on. And these 7 churches are symbolic of 7 in a number of ways. 7 rays, each one manifested the qualities of one of the rays. And they could also be compared to the 7 chakras. Okay, now the 7 rays are, we'll just go over them quite briefly. Ray 1 is a ray of willpower and purpose. And ray 2, love, wisdom. Ray 3 is divine intelligence and matter and how it manifests. Ray 4 is harmony through conflict, meaning that that's an interesting phrase, harmony through conflict, because people, you have the greatest sense of peace after a period of conflict which has been resolved. If you've never had any conflict, you can't really appreciate peace. But when conflict is resolved, then you can have a much greater sense of peace. And then ray 5 is concrete knowledge. And ray 6, who can tell us what ray 6 is? I bet Ed can. Are you there, Ed?
It's devotion.
Right. And how does that play out, do you think, in people?
Well, it's necessary to be devoted to the truth. So it plays, and it comes. In the negative side of it, you can be fanatic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very emotionally charged ray, and it comes through the solar plexus, and it's governed the last 2,000 years of the age of Pisces. That's why we've had such strong emotions. The Crusades are symbolic of the ray 6 energy. Now, on the good side of the ray 6 energy was Jesus. Jesus exemplified the ideal man, and its devotion and idealism is symbolized by this ray. And the ideal man was symbolized by Christ. And this will happen as we switch to the ages. The great lessons of the ages are presented at the beginning, and then near the end of the age, they become corrupted. And then new ideals, new lessons have to be presented. And right now we're leaving the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius. And service is the key word for Aquarius, whereas sacrifice and idealism were the key words for the age of Pisces. And so Jesus showed us the good side of the ideal man, but people get the ideal in their heads about what things are supposed to be, and then they start fighting over them. And that kind of corrupted the message of Pisces. But nothing is perfect. As we learn our lessons, we make a lot of mistakes. And
In
yeah,
Aquarius, we have to, we build on we build on what was taught in Pisces. We're still devoted to the truth, but we're devoted to a different way of expressing the truth.
right. Like sacrifice, there's lessons to be learned from sacrifice. And we take the lessons, we take the good part of sacrifice with us and leave the bad part behind. The bad part is where you sacrifice and don't get anything in return. You give all your money to the church authorities and you get nothing back. Whereas the true art of sacrifice is there's no such thing as real sacrifice. That's what you learn. Because when you truly give in the correct attitude, you automatically get something back. So there's really no such thing as sacrifice in the true sense of the word. Okay. And then the last one is ceremonial magic. And this governs, as it says, ceremony, but it also governs business. And business will be very big in the Aquarian age. And business has got kind of a bad rap because it's got off to a rough start. But eventually business will become very cooperative. And instead of having executives where they get paid millions of dollars for not working much harder than the guy that just is barely squeaking by, there will be a lot more equality and a lot of participation from the bottom up rather than just the top down. So business will be completely revitalized during the Aquarian age, and it won't be too many more years before business will be seen as a lot more benevolent in the eyes of the people. Right now, a lot of people condemn, especially big businesses, condemned by a lot of people, but that will eventually change.
Be a lot more cooperative businesses and people working together, and network marketing was a precursor to what's to come. Because
Right.
in network marketing, for me to succeed, I have to help other people succeed. And that was kind of the message of the divine message of the seventh ray.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we can see signs of the development of the seventh ray working out in business. Network marketing is one thing. Cooperative ownership of businesses is becoming more permeating and so on. Okay, now there's this number 7, as far as the 7 spirits before the throne. They are reflected in several different ways. They are reflected in the spiritual hierarchy by 7 different individuals representing the 7 rays. And we'll go through that. Let me share a screen with you on the hierarchy. Okay, can everybody see that? Here's the presentation of the hierarchies, and we have the solar logos, and then he has a reflection, and then the reflection is down to the spiritual hierarchy led by the Christ. And we have the different rays shown here. The ray 1 is led by the Manu. Okay, he's called the Vavasvata Manu, and is the Manu of the 5th root race. Now, assisting him are the master Jupiter and Moria. So they're all connected to ray 1. Okay. Now ray 2 up here is a Christ, and he's called the Badshiv, how do you pronounce it? Badshivita, and also known as the Lord Maitreya. And
Bodhisattva.
yeah, and in the Mohammedan religion, he's known by the name of the Imam Mahdi. So under him is the is a European master, and under him is Kuthumi, who's known as KH, and under him is Dwal Kul, known as DK. So we have 4 masters cooperating on ray 2, led by the Christ. And ray 3 is headed up by an entity called the Lord of Civilization. When this was first given out in the 1920s, the master that was head of this department was not named, but he's been replaced by the master Rakosi, which is down here. He was over ray 7. And who's taken his place, DK hasn't told us. But Master Rakosi is the same as the one in history known as Saint Germain, and also Roger Bacon, and there's been several other.
And Francis.
Yeah, Francis Bacon also. And DK hints that the Roger Bacon may have written the plays of Shakespeare, but he doesn't say for sure, but he kind of hints around that possibility. And
Well, they're written by Francis Bacon.
Yeah, Francis Bacon.
Yes,
Oh,
I have plenty of books to prove that.
yeah. Well, the DK kind of hints at it, but he doesn't say 100% for sure, but so it's quite possible. Okay. Now, under the Lord of Civilization is a Venetian master, who DK doesn't give the name for. And then under the ray 3 is the subsidiary rays, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Under 4 is the master Serapis. And then 5 is the master Hilarion, who was once Paul of Tarsus. And then 6 is the master Jesus. Now, you have to understand here that there were 2 entities that represented the Christ, which was Jesus, and then the Christ came and co-occupied the body of Jesus. So there was actually 2 entities in there. It's 2 different masters involved. And Jesus is on the 6th ray, and the Christ himself is on the 2nd ray. And then Rakosi was on the master of the 7th ray, and he has taken over as the Lord of Civilization. Okay, then we have the 7 spirits before the throne. And the 7 spirits before the throne are great entities that actually occupy entire planets. And the first is one that occupies a planet that's invisible to us at this time, which is Vulcan. And it's within the orbit of Mercury, but it's people have every once in a while somebody claims to have seen this, and then it just seems to disappear from sight. Matter of fact, there's a guy on Google, he posted a image he captured through his telescope, which looks like a planet within the orbit of Mercury, and then you can't find it again. So it's a very mysterious planet, and it's on ray 1. Ray 2 is represented by Jupiter. Okay, Saturn is on ray 3, and the Earth itself is on ray 3. And then Mercury is on ray 4, Venus ray 5, Neptune ray 6, and Uranus, Ray 7. These are the 7 sacred planets represented by the 7 spirits before the throne. Now, the non-sacred planets are the Earth, like say, is on Ray 3, and it's closely associated with Saturn. Mars is on Ray 6, closely associated with Neptune. And Pluto is Ray 1, closely associated with Vulcan. So these are, according to the esoteric writings, the 7 spirits before the throne. Okay, any comments or questions on that before we move on to the next verse? Oh, time's just about up, so we'll have to schedule that next verse for next week. Any comments or questions before we move on?
Van Morrison sang a song about the Bodhisattva.
Did he?
Yeah.
Somebody sang a song, Shambhala, too. Who was that? I can't remember.
Shambhala.
Yeah, it's a famous
Shambhala.
band. Yeah, but yeah. You know, there's a number of famous rock stars that was kind of an esoteric stuff.
George Harrison.
Yeah, and the guy that organized the band Blondie, he's written a whole bunch of esoteric books. He's more famous for his books than he is the band. And I think it was Blondie was one that he's over. But
Hey, JJ?
yeah.
Hey, I got lost in the 7 ray thing. Can you connect that to the first 3 verses of the book of Revelation? Why were we going into that? How did it connect to the
Oh,
opening
just
of
because it
Revelation?
mentions the 7 spirits before the throne. So I thought I would go into some detail about the 7 spirits, which are the 7 spirits that are over the 7 planetary bodies before the that orbit the sun. And
Okay.
these are very powerful entities that are over the evolution of the entire solar system. So anyway, that's I went into quite a bit of detail there. We'll focus more on the actual scriptures as we move along here. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, in the first verse, it indicates, it's the book of Revelations, or the unveiling, wasn't given to the world. It says it was given unto his servants.
You know,
So
that's a good point. That's something
it
I
was just given to his servants, not to everyone. Everyone is going to misinterpret it, but his servants would take it a different way. It's given to them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been a handful of people throughout history that have got the right interpretation. And, but as far as the world goes, they just look at the surface of things. And so they've been expecting the end of the world for 2,000 years now. And it just hasn't showed up, thank God. I don't want the world to end yet.
We can do without all those plagues, I think.
However, we're screwing things up so bad, the world could end with all the atomic weapons we got in the world. And
Well, the world as it was 100 years ago has ended. We don't ride around in horse and buggies and such as that.